I mean, I think the whole idea of getting a lot of people to like use ChatGPT and all of this stuff is to lead us down this path that Kissinger and Schmidt, among others, sort of are charting out for humanity, where if you, it's pretty much common sense though. Like if you develop a skill and then don't do it for 10 or 15 years, for example, you kind of forget how to do it, right? Or even, I graduated from university like a little more than 10 years ago. How well do I recall the stuff that I took in university? Not great, right? So there's this whole idea of if you don't use it, you lose it. So if people are depending on AI to tell them where to turn when they're driving their car and, no one uses like actual maps anymore. I mean, I understand that it's convenient, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, we need to go back to the 90s, right? But, it becomes after a while a slippery slope where people are just having the computer tell them everything to do. Every step of their lives ends up becoming micromanaged to an extent. And the idea is that AI, through all the data that it absorbs about us, knows so much about us. Some of these people say it knows us better than we even know ourselves. That allows for an unprecedented degree of manipulation. And the problem is that the people producing and programming AI and ultimately controlling AI and what it can do not have our best interests at heart. And it is not a good idea to basically hand them our brains in a bag,
Hey YouTube world, harvest is plenty. Thanks for stopping by to check out the video. I really appreciate your support. I would like to say thank you for all my new subscribers and also for all my past subscribers as well. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for your support. So I want to talk just a little bit about artificial intelligence. I see it as an emerging threat. I've been talking about artificial intelligence, which is not really real intelligence or true intelligence, but it's emerging as a threat to humanity. And I think that we're going to end up like the Terminator at some point. Rise of the machines. Because a lot of companies are turning over their entire systems to AI to run it. So it definitely will be some discrimination coming. And as I said before, and I linked the video in my last one, that there's demons living within the machines. And if you have demons living within the machines, they definitely would try to exterminate humans who are not part of their agenda. So we're going to jump into an interview with Whitney Webb, and she's going to discuss where we're headed in the future with AI. Until my next video, guys, thank you. Take care. May God continue to bless you and your family. Talk to you soon.
Totally. But who owns AI, right? It's pretty much Silicon Valley companies. So like even OpenAI, Sam Altman's thing, that's essentially like owned by Microsoft, right? And so you have what? Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle, all of these companies essentially owning like almost everything. And all of those companies are contractors for the military and intelligence, right? Guess throw Palantir in the mix too. And when you consider something like Palantir, they profile people. They suck up all of your data and then they profile you. And Palantir can profile like whether or not they deem you subversive or not. And what happens when AI, gets access of that and gets put in control of things like humanitarian aid, like they're talking about doing, or in charge of, the government itself, which is also talked about in the Schmidt-Kissinger book. It gets complicated. So, a lot of people have been talking about the coming sort of like social credit paradigm, for example. So what happens if there's a big crisis, your country is like a war zone or the economy collapses and you're dependent on humanitarian aid or some sort of aid from the government or some other group and there isn't enough for everyone, right? And so they decide, oh, well, it's fair to put super intelligent AI in charge of it. And then that AI is like, oh, well, this person's been very compliant and hasn't committed all of these thought crimes, but not you. Who is it going to decide to give the food rations to and stuff like that. You know, that's the risk of a lot of this stuff when it gets put in charge of too many systems. They've gone from before this AI algorithm to identifying something like 15 to 20 targets a day to identifying hundreds of targets a day. Something's going on. And there's a huge issue there with what if that AI is using, you know, social media activity to decide who lives and who dies, literally. And what happens when that kind of technology gets exported. I mean, Israel's tech sector specifically is known for testing all sorts of tech on Palestinians, surveillance tech and weapons tech, and then they export it abroad. Israel's, defense tech and defense industry is massive. It's like, I think, one of the biggest parts of their GDP, right? So, you know, this isn't just going to stay there. And AI weaponry has also been tested in Ukraine to a significant degree. And there's a lot of people, the same people that created Palantir, essentially Peter Thiel, you know, a lot of that money is behind, you know, the AI weaponry stuff today. That's troubling stuff. And then there's another issue of whether AI is actually accurate or not. So, you know, they'll say, like with facial recognition, I think there was a report a few years ago in the UK that a lot of the facial recognition stuff that the Met Police and other law enforcement groups are using are insanely inaccurate, but they want to continue using it and like deepen its involvement in identifying people, whether it's like at live events and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, it was insanely inaccurate. I mean, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was like under 50% accurate. So like flipping a coin is more accurate in that case. And what happens when AI algorithms that choose who lives and who dies, are put in charge of stuff and they're like 70% accurate or less? Because, I mean, the government's really corrupt with contractors. Like, they don't always pick the best contractor for the job. So someone has connections that gets their AI in charge and they oversell their AI and say it's 90% 95% accurate, but it's not audited by an independent company, right? And so it's actually like in reality 65% accurate or something. And you're putting it in charge of like stuff that has a major effect on people's lives. That kind of stuff is happening. And I'm talking about stuff that hasn't necessarily quite happened yet, but we're headed there. So people need to keep in mind that a large amount of alternative media gets money from what I refer to as Thielverse, meaning Peter Thiel, right? But really more broadly, it's the PayPal mafia, as it's been called, people affiliated with PayPal to various degrees, which of course includes Elon Musk. They have a lot of influence over alternative media and even over content platforms like Rumble, and have been funding quote unquote libertarian movements and all of this stuff. But I don't really see them as being libertarian at all. So like taking Peter Thiel as an example, you know, Peter Thiel claims to be a Bitcoin maximalist, right? And then he goes, after he says that, on a panel next to then CIA Director Mike Pompeo and says, Bitcoin is a Chinese financial weapon against the US dollar. Right. And then in terms of libertarianism, you know, Peter Thiel says he's a libertarian, but instead he created Palantir, which is the most insane surveillance tool that the CIA has today. So you literally handed the worst part of the state the worst tool possible, but you're a libertarian and you're against state overreach. And so similarly, Elon Musk you have to look at the actions of Musk and then what he says. And not enough people do that, whether it's for Musk or really anyone. You have to look at people's actions, not just what they say, because someone can say all the right things and then, you know, be totally fucking you behind your back. And if you're just going to take what they're telling you and the excuses and whatever, I mean, you'll never figure out what's actually going on. And I think that's fair for Elon Musk as well. Did he buy Twitter to save free speech, or did he buy Twitter to have a massive data to train AI on and to train all other sorts of products he has on? Or did he make it, like he's openly admitted, did he buy it so he can turn Twitter, now X, into X the everything app that doesn't just become, isn't just social media. It becomes half of the financial system and becomes American WeChat, which of course WeChat in China is the everything app means you have all the data, basically. If people use it for everything, it accumulates more data than everything else and it has all the control. has all the control. So, you know, people are naive here, I think, because, I mean, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, but is he the richest man in the world just because of his own entrepreneurial whatever? Or is it because his companies were held up by government subsidies that allowed him to become rich, and he's the richest man in the world because he worked with the state?
There. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
His company, SpaceX, is currently a contractor to both the military and intelligence communities. Yeah. Its success is contingent on those contracts, SpaceX. And his entire trajectory up to this point has been contingent on government subsidies or things of that nature. That's a problem. So, I mean, this is stuff that people need to keep in mind. And ultimately, I think there's a lot of cultural issues with celebrity in the West, where people have been trained to wait for a political savior who's going to come and save us of all of our problems, and no one actually has to do anything, and we can just sit back and wait for the right person to run for office, and then we all vote for them, and then this one person is magically gonna save us from all of our problems. People have sort of been primed to feel that way. I mean, you can argue maybe like superhero movies and religion maybe and all other sorts of stuff has shaped us to be like that culturally, but that is a problem. What we should do is take responsibility for what we need to survive and what our communities need to survive, and, you know, get as local as possible and not be so dependent on these people at the national level or assume that one person can fix everything. Because that hasn't worked. And I mean, things are more complicated now than they've been in a very long time. And can we really wait for the right person and put all our trust in this theoretical one person who's going to save everything? I don't think so. I think that time is better spent, you know, learning how to do some stuff yourself, taking responsibility for your own life and your well-being and your family's well-being, right? I mean, a lot of people in alternative media are going to promote certain figures. I mean, maybe they're funded by them, maybe they're not, right? But ultimately, you know, a lot of what keeps the current system in power is our trust in it, or our, you know, like the financial system in particular, right? You know, trust is super fundamental to that, but it doesn't deserve our trust, right? The current system. And so we need to withdraw our consent from the system and our trust in these people who have spent decades and decades and decades screwing everyone over. You know, it's time to put our trust in people who actually deserve it. And a lot of times in any one person's life, you know, the people you actually know you can trust are people you know at the local level. And so I think, you know, it's time to kind of start there. And, you know, that sort of leads into the whole idea of like decentralization also, that like the more power goes back to the local level, the less power the national or state or whatever has, you know. And there needs to be a power shift towards the public and towards the people. And we can't just wait for the right politician to be put in charge of the state to give that to us, right? We have to do that ourselves, because as we've historically seen, the state, whether it's capitalist or communist, accumulates more money and power for itself.